Episode 4. Domenica visits the local cafe, the only place with internet access. As soon as she checks her phone, she's overwhelmed by messages from business partners informing her that they're ending their agreements because of the scandal surrounding her name. Realizing just how much Max has destroyed her life, Domenica is consumed with anger and vows never to forgive him. Herminia warmly tells Domenica that if she needs anything, she should not hesitate to ask. Meanwhile, Andres informs Pilar and Nicolasa that rumors about Domenica are spreading throughout Puebla. People are saying that she fled the city because a freeloader left her bankrupt, making her unable to meet her financial obligations. Pilar is disgusted by the gossip. She says it is cruel for people to make fond of a woman who was not only scammed out of her fortune but was also abandoned at the altar. Andres adds that the situation is becoming even more serious because several investors are threatening to cancel their business deals with Domenica. At the local cafe, Domenica calls her godfather Andres and asks him to look for the property documents for the hacienda. He promises to search for them and then tells her that Pilar and Nicolasa are with him and are desperate to hear her voice. Domenica says she wants them to hear what she is about to announce. Andres puts the call on speaker. Domenica tells them that she has made up her mind and is never returning to Puebla. She says that chapter of her life is over and she has no intention of looking back. She then instructs her godfather, Andres, to establish a trust fund for the group home. She also tells him to sell everything she owns in Puebla, including her factories, her mansion, and all of her other properties, reminding him that he has full power of attorney over all of her assets and can handle the sales on her behalf. Luis Fernando calls Sofia to apologize for taking so long to come back. He explains that he is dealing with a problem involving someone who is trying to claim part of his land. Sofia tells him not to worry and encourages him to take all the time he needs to resolve the issue. She reassures him that she and the baby are doing well. Luis Fernando then asks if he can speak to his son. He talks to Sofia's pregnant belly and asks Jose Maria to behave by not kicking his aunt so much. Sofia laughs and says she is certain that little Jose Maria already recognizes his father's voice. A few moments later, she ends the call, explaining that she does not want to be late for her yoga class. After the call, Mercedes expresses her hope that the dispute over the land will be settled soon so that Luis Fernando can return to Mexico and be with his son when he is born. Luis Fernando runs into Domenica in town, and she immediately tells him that she is going to file a complaint against him for invading her land. Luis Fernando tries to explain the situation, but Domenica cuts him off. She tells him to save his explanations because she trusts the law to settle the dispute. Determined to make her listen, Luis Fernando gently grabs her arm, but Domenica quickly pulls away and firmly tells him not to touch her. Just then, Gennaro arrives and demands to know what problem Luis Fernando has with his boss. Luis Fernando asks Domenica to control her bodyguard so they can have a civil conversation. Gennaro quickly corrects him, saying that he is the manager of the hacienda, not a bodyguard. Luis Fernando fires back by calling him the jerk who has been tearing down the fences on his property. Enraged, Gennaro pulls out his gun and warns Luis Fernando to watch the way he speaks to him. Luis Fernando challenges him to put the gun away if he is really as brave as he claims. Sensing that the situation is getting out of control, Domenica tells Gennaro that they should leave. However, Gennaro refuses to back down. Instead of shooting, he uses the gun to strike Luis Fernando across the face. Meanwhile, in Puebla, Pilar tells Kiera that Domenica's business partners no longer want to do business with her because of the scandal. Kiera tells her mother not to panic, believing that everything will eventually work itself out. Andres disagrees, warning her that the situation is far more serious than she realizes. Kiera insists that if Domenica was strong enough to overcome the deaths of her parents, she can also recover from losing her business. Pilar then reveals that Domenica has instructed Andres to sell her mansion and all of her properties because she has no intention of ever returning to Puebla. Hearing this, Kiera becomes furious. She accuses Domenica of trying to make their lives miserable and demands to know where they are supposed to live if everything is sold. Back in town, the fight between Gennaro and Luis Fernando continues. After unsuccessfully trying to separate them, Domenica gives up in frustration. Annoyed by both men, tells them to go ahead and kill each other before walking away. Domenica meets with Cosme to file a formal complaint against Luis Fernando, insisting that he is unlawfully claiming part of the lagoon and the northern section of her land. Cosme tries to reassure her, explaining that, as far as our knows, the land belongs to her. He adds that Mr. Montero obtained the concession for the lagoon for 30 years, so there is no reason to stir up unnecessary conflict. Domenica asks whether there is any official document that proves what he is saying, at least until the documents she requested from Puebla arrive. Cosme tells her that Prudencio, the foreman of Espejo de Luna, has never been able to prove that the disputed land belongs to them. He also reminds her that, as the highest authority in town, he is supporting her claim. Despite his reassurance, Domenica insists on filing the complaint against Luis Fernando. Cosme cannot understand why she is determined to create a legal dispute when there is no immediate need for one. He asks her why she is looking for problems. Domenica firmly replies that she is not looking for trouble. She simply wants everything to be handled according to the law and intends to protect what rightfully belongs to her. Luis Fernando arrives at the municipal office, where he finds Domenica waiting. She informs him that she has officially filed a complaint against him for encroaching on her property. Domenica makes it clear that she will do everything in her power to ensure that he never sets foot on her land again, especially the lagoon. Luis Fernando tries to reason with her, but Domenica remains firm, insisting that the matter will now be settled through the proper legal channels. Meanwhile, Pilar has a conversation with Kiera. She tells her daughter that even if they manage to convince Domenica to return to Puebla, they cannot keep depending on her forever. Pilar believes it is time for them to build their own future using the money they already have. Kiera immediately objects. She tells her mother that they cannot rely on that money because it is all they have to their name, and once it is gone, they will have nothing left. Pilar gently encourages her to think differently. She believes they can make the money grow if they work hard and make wise decisions. She also suggests asking Andres for financial advice, convinced that his experience could help them make the right investments and secure their future. Gennaro informs Domenica that Bartolo has not paid his rent for several months. Surprised, Domenica asks why Bartolo is still living on her land despite failing to meet his obligations. Gennaro explains that he allowed Bartolo and his family to stay because Andres asked him to, but they have continued taking advantage of the situation without paying. He tells Domenica that, if she gives the order, he will evict them immediately. Without hesitation, Domenica tells Gennaro to throw Bartolo and his family off the property. She makes it clear that she does not want freeloaders living on her land. At night, Gennaro and Roque secretly fire several gunshots as part of a plan to frighten Domenica and make her abandon the hacienda. The sudden sound of gunfire startles her and leaves her visibly shaken. The next day, Domenica decides to learn how to use a gun. While practicing, she accidentally points the weapon in Rosita's direction. Rosita, who is carrying a bundle of firewood, quickly begs her not to shoot. Realizing how dangerous the situation is, Domenica immediately lowers the gun, apologizes, and asks Rosita if she is all right. Just then, Luis Fernando arrives after hearing the commotion. He scolds Domenica for firing a gun in the open, reminding her that she could have seriously injured Rosita. Seeing that she has no experience with guns, Luis Fernando shows her the proper way to handle and shoot safely. After the lesson, Domenica coldly tells him that if he is expecting a word of thanks, he is going to be very disappointed. Gennaro carries out Domenica's orders and throws Bartolo and his family off the hacienda. When Luis Fernando learns what has happened, he offers Bartolo and his family work and a place to stay on his property. A short while later, Domenica discovers what Gennaro has done. Horrified, she confronts him and tells him that burning the family's possessions was never part of her instructions. Gennaro defends his actions by reminding her of what she did to him when she arrived at the hacienda. He says he simply followed her example. He gave Bartolo time to leave, and when they failed to do so, he dealt with them the same way she dealt with him. Domenica is left speechless. She admits that what he did was wrong and then confesses that what she did to him was wrong as well. Sincerely regretting her actions, she apologizes and tells Gennaro that she is not that kind of person. Surprised by her honesty, Gennaro thanks her and says she is the first person who has ever offered him a genuine apology. Just then, Rosita arrives with Luis Fernando. Holding her doll tightly, Rosita tearfully begs Domenica not to hurt it. Looking at Domenica with disappointment, Rosita calls her a terrible person. Luis Fernando also confronts Domenica, asking how she could take out her anger on an innocent family, especially on a little girl like Rosita, who has already lost so much. Episode 5. Looking at Domenica with disappointment, Rosita calls her a terrible person. Luis Fernando also confronts Domenica, asking how she could take out her anger on an innocent family, especially on a little girl like Rosita, who has already lost so much. Domenica returns Rosita's doll and apologizes for what happened. Luis Fernando tells her that the situation never should have reached this point. He explains that while the family's belongings may not have been worth much financially, Bartolo and his wife had worked very hard to buy every single one of them. To them, those possessions meant everything. Domenica insists that she never intended for their belongings to be burned. When Luis Fernando asks why she ordered Bartolo and his family to be evicted in the first place, she tries to explain, but he cuts her off. He tells her that she does not need to say anything because her actions have already spoken louder than her words. Meanwhile, Chiara tells Sylvia that she is going to the hacienda to bring her cousin back home. She also asks Sylvia to keep searching for Max and promises that they will find a way to stay in touch despite the poor internet reception in the area. Back at La Jolla, Gennaro notices that Domenica feels guilty about what happened. He tells her not to waste her sympathy on Bartolo and his wife because, in his opinion, they deserved what happened. He says she can feel sorry for Rosita, but not for her parents. Gennaro also warns Domenica to be careful because he believes the workers are cunning and will take advantage of her kindness. Domenica disagrees. She tells Gennaro that she refuses to allow anyone to abuse her ever again, but she also cannot stand by and allow innocent people to be treated unjustly. Gennaro replies that he feels the same way and claims he never wants to be seen as the villain, but says people often push him to that point. Domenica orders him to put out the fire and clean up the mess. Elsewhere, Mercedes walks along the lagoon and is reminded of the painful day she caught her husband, Eugenio, with another woman. In the flashback, she slaps him and tells him she will never forgive him. Eugenio begs her not to tell Luis Fernando the truth, and Mercedes replies that the last thing she would ever do is hurt their son. Lost in her memories, Mercedes accidentally steps into quicksand. Terrified, she shouts for help. Pedro hears her screams and rushes over. He tells her to stay calm and avoid struggling. He carefully instructs her to shift her weight little by little while he slowly pulls her to safety. Although Mercedes is frightened, Pedro keeps reassuring her until she is finally free. Grateful, Mercedes thanks him for saving her life. Pedro offers to walk her home, but she tells him he has already done enough. Pedro insists that he is not leaving her alone and jokes that she will simply have to put up with his company. Mercedes then tells him that she lives at Espejo de Luna. Later, Gennaro asks Nieves to find out what kind of man Domenica likes and whether she has a husband or boyfriend. Nieves asks why he wants to know. Gennaro refuses to explain, saying only that the information will help him find a way to send Domenica back to the city. He tells his niece to stop asking questions and do as he says. At the same time, Chiara gets stranded after her car becomes stuck while she is searching for a phone signal. She runs into Gennaro, who tells her that the nearest place with internet access is Santa Teresa. When Chiara asks for his help, Gennaro says there is no time to waste and tells her to get on his horse. Chiara nervously admits that horses seem to hate her. Gennaro jokingly replies that she must have done something to offend them. Not long afterward, Domenica goes to Espejo de Luna carrying a bed and several household items to replace what was destroyed. She sincerely apologizes to Bartolo and his family, admitting that she was wrong. Bartolo and his wife refuse to accept anything from her, but Domenica explains that she came only to apologize. She tells them that if they do not want the things she brought, they are free to throw them away or even burn them. As she is leaving, Luis Fernando sees her and asks what she is doing at Espejo de Luna. Domenica tells him she came to replace some of the belongings that Gennaro burned but insists she will not force anyone to accept her gifts. Luis Fernando asks whether guilt is finally catching up with her. Domenica calmly replies that she is simply doing what she believes is right. Luis Fernando points out that a few new belongings cannot erase the pain she caused Bartolo's family. Bartolo adds that although their possessions were old and inexpensive, they were filled with memories and meant a great deal to them. Domenica apologizes once again, saying she never intended for any of it to happen, especially frightening Rosita with the gun. She tells the family that if they do not want what she brought, they can give it away or burn it. As she walks away, Luis Fernando stops her and invites her to have a cup of coffee at his house. Domenica declines, telling him she has no intention of visiting his home for any reason. Later, Luis Fernando calls Sangenis to ask whether there have been any developments in the search for the man who scammed his mother. Sangenis says he still has no news but assures him that he has not stopped investigating. Luis Fernando thanks him and asks him to search his mother's house for any documents related to Espejo de Luna or past legal disputes with La Joya Hacienda over the land north of the lagoon. Sangenis suggests that he also search the records at City Hall. Luis Fernando explains that he has already checked there but plans to travel to the capital as soon as he can because of the legal battle Domenica has started over the disputed land. Sangenis promises that if he needs help with his issue with Domenica, he will gladly represent him. Luis Fernando admits that he cannot understand why Domenica is so bitter. Sangenis tells him to ask about her, but Luis Fernando replies that she has only recently arrived and that the only thing he knows is that she is the daughter of the former owners of La Joya. Meanwhile, Domenica warns Chiara to keep her distance from Gennaro, reminding her that he works for her and that she does not want any misunderstandings. A curious Luis Fernando searches for information about Domenica online. To his surprise, he discovers news reports revealing that she was abandoned at the altar by her fiancé in Puebla, finally giving him some insight into the pain she has been carrying. Episode 6. Luis Fernando visits the local internet cafe to research Domenica and learns about the scandal surrounding her broken engagement. Meanwhile, the cafe owner can't resist digging into Domenica's story herself, and before long, gossip about the wealthy heiress begins spreading through town. Elsewhere, Mercedes visits Pedro with a birthday cake and returns the blanket he once wrapped around her after rescuing her from quicksand. During their conversation, it's revealed that Pedro was abandoned as a baby, making the celebration even more meaningful. Still deeply wounded by Max's betrayal, Domenica is no longer the kind and gentle woman she once was. Although only a few months have passed, the humiliation of being deceived has left her bitter and guarded. Pilar, Chiara, and Nicolasa try to convince her that this new version of herself is not the woman they know and love. At the ranch, Luis continues helping Bartolo and discovers his injured leg needs medical attention. Promising to take him for an X-ray, Luis shows once again that his compassion extends far beyond his own family. Meanwhile, Domenica demands access to the ranch's financial records from the day Gennaro began managing the property, determined to uncover everything that has happened in her absence. Unknown to her, Chiara overhears Gennaro discussing the accounts and secretly joins forces with him, agreeing to work together to force Domenica back to Puebla. As preparations begin for Pedro's birthday party, Mercedes organizes a special celebration for the first birthday he has ever truly celebrated. Rosita is overjoyed to discover that Luis is a doctor, believing God has finally answered her prayers. Back in town, Chiara secretly spreads news of Domenica's humiliation, making sure everyone learns about the scandal that drove her away from Puebla. The gossip quickly reaches the townspeople, leaving Domenica's painful past impossible to escape. Later, Domenica arrives at Pedro's birthday celebration and privately apologizes to Luis Fernando for her recent behavior. However, the moment is short-lived. After discovering that people at the party know about her failed wedding, she mistakenly believes Luis is responsible and angrily slaps him across the face. Soon after, Domenica receives a telegram ordering her to appear before a judge in Mexico City. Believing the land dispute has become even more serious, she decides to travel there with Chiara. As they prepare to leave, Chiara encourages Domenica to stop letting men control her emotions, while secretly believing her plan to sabotage Domenica's new life is finally working. The episode ends on a shocking note. As Chiara and her friend Sylvia argue over Domenica's engagement ring while driving through Mexico City, they lose concentration and crash into Sylvia, who is standing outside the hospital, before speeding away from the scene. Episode 7. Chiara and Sylvia flee the scene after accidentally hitting Sofia with their car. In the panic, Sylvia realizes she has dropped her diamond ring near the accident. While Chiara drives away to avoid being seen, Sylvia secretly returns to search for it. Meanwhile, Luis Fernando rushes to the scene, helping paramedics save Sofia's life. Although Sofia survives, tragedy strikes when her unborn baby, Jose Maria, cannot be saved. The ring is unknowingly packed among Sofia's belongings at the hospital. Back at the ranch, Nieves is heartbroken after Pedro tells her he doesn't love her. She confides in Nicolasa that she has loved him since the day they first met, while Pedro later admits that he already has feelings for another woman but believes he has nothing to offer because of his poverty. Elsewhere, Domenica prepares for her court hearing while Chiara struggles to hide her guilt over the accident. During the trial, Domenica continues her legal battle against Gilberto Leon, determined to recover her fortune, restore her dignity, and seek justice for the betrayal she suffered. Meanwhile, Pilar and Nicolasa run into Mercedes at the market. The encounter quickly turns tense as Mercedes criticizes Domenica's behavior toward Luis Fernando and his family, leaving Pilar visibly offended. At the ranch, Gennaro and Gabriel worry about Domenica's request to inspect the estate's financial records. Fearing she'll uncover their secrets, they begin plotting new ways to drive her away for good. After the hearing, Domenica confirms that she has made up her mind to leave Puebla behind forever and build a new life at the ranch, despite her godfather's attempts to change her mind. Chiara tries to convince her otherwise, secretly hoping Domenica will abandon the property. Meanwhile, Luis stays by Sofia's side as she recovers in the hospital. When her belongings are returned, he discovers a diamond ring that doesn't belong to her. After speaking with the hospital security guard, Luis realizes the ring flew from the car that struck Sofia. Convinced it belongs to the driver, he believes it could be the key to identifying the person responsible for the hit and run. However, the detective dismisses his theory, leaving Luis frustrated and determined to investigate on his own. Before returning to the ranch, Domenica pays an emotional visit to the orphanage, where the children beg her not to leave. She promises to stay in touch and assures Lupita that she'll return one day if she continues to do well in school. She also visits her parents' graves, promising to honor their legacy and rebuild everything they worked so hard to create. Back at the ranch, Pedro finally confesses his love to Adelinda and kisses her, only to be caught by Osvaldo, who angrily orders him to stay away. Shortly afterward, Domenica returns to the ranch and once again demands the estate's financial records. Gennaro claims they were destroyed in the fire, but Domenica gives him time to recover the invoices and receipts before announcing that she intends to make peace with Luis Fernando. Determined to settle the land dispute, Domenica visits Luis Fernando and offers to buy his property. Still grieving the loss of his son, Luis misunderstands her intentions, accusing her of caring only about money before angrily walking away. Heartbroken, Domenica breaks down in tears outside, where Rosita finds her. After apologizing to Rosita and Tomasia for everything that has happened, Domenica promises to make things right. Tomasia, in turn, apologizes for spreading rumors about Domenica's humiliation at the altar, marking the beginning of a possible reconciliation. Meanwhile, away from prying eyes, Chiara and Gennaro's growing alliance takes an unexpected turn when the two share a passionate kiss. Episode 8. The morning begins with Gennaro riding across the ranch, where he unexpectedly runs into Chiara. The two tease each other about their recent encounter before Gennaro asks whether she has come up with a plan to get rid of Domenica once and for all. Chiara admits that her cousin is proving much harder to manipulate than she expected. Back at the ranch, Domenica returns home looking disappointed after her failed attempt to make peace with Luis Fernando. Nicolasa, Pilar, and Mercedes quickly notice her gloomy mood and ask what happened. Domenica explains that Luis rejected her offer because he still believes she deliberately humiliated him. She admits she now realizes he never spread the rumors about her failed wedding and regrets slapping him. Nicolasa points out that most men don't react well to public humiliation, while Domenica insists she wants to make things right with everyone. During the conversation, Nicolasa also mentions that Pedro has been working on the ranch without ever receiving a salary. Meanwhile, Mercedes is haunted by memories of her late husband Eugenio. She recalls the painful day he confessed that he had been involved with Carmen, the maid, and that Carmen had died while giving birth to his child. Furious at the betrayal, Mercedes had threatened to take young Luis to Spain so his father would never see him again. The painful memories are interrupted when Prudencio brings her tea. She asks him whether he knows what became of Carmen's son, leaving Prudencio visibly uncomfortable. At the stables, Pedro is talking to the horses when Domenica finds him. She asks why he has never been paid for his work and learns that his only compensation has been food and a place to sleep. Pedro tries to defend the arrangement, but Domenica cuts him off and promises to speak with Gennaro immediately. Although Pedro begs her not to create trouble, Domenica assures him that everyone who works on her ranch deserves fair pay. Elsewhere, Gennaro and Andres secretly tear down the fence separating the disputed lagoon, hoping to provoke another confrontation with Luis Fernando. At the same time, Prudencio prays for guidance, wondering whether he should finally tell Mercedes the truth about Carmen's son. Luis interrupts him, asking when the internet will be restored. Prudencio encourages him to rest, but Luis admits that work is the only thing keeping his mind off the loss of Jose Maria. Back at the ranch, Bartolo discovers the destroyed fence, while Pedro visits Nieves to tell her the good news that Domenica has promised to pay him properly. Nieves initially refuses to speak to him, still hurt by his rejection, but eventually listens as Pedro explains that he only wanted her friendship. Soon afterward, Gennaro approaches Domenica with what appears to be concern for the ranch. He suggests hiring veterinarians to care for the livestock and then pretends that paying Pedro was his own idea. Domenica is surprised because he repeats almost exactly what she had planned to discuss. Believing he is finally cooperating, she tells him to bring any future ranch problems directly to her. As she walks away, Gennaro quietly smiles, pleased that his deception has worked. Meanwhile, tensions continue to rise in Gabriel's household. Maria asks Osvaldo to take over her duties at the shop so she can study, but he refuses. Their argument quickly escalates until Gabriel arrives and immediately sides with his son. He mocks Maria's dreams of getting an education, insisting she will never make it beyond elementary school and threatening to beat her if she continues arguing. Hermina tries to calm the situation, but Gabriel silences both of them. Not far away, Gennaro and Andres discuss their next move against Domenica. Andres suggests they stop stealing money from the ranch and simply manage it honestly, but Gennaro refuses to change his ways. Instead, he blames Pedro for revealing the truth about his unpaid work and vows to make him regret it. Their conversation is interrupted when Chiara arrives carrying a spider trapped inside a jar. Laughing, she jokes that she's named it Genera, making Gennaro visibly uncomfortable. Later, Chiara sneaks into Domenica's bedroom while her cousin prepares to shower. Taking advantage of the opportunity, she secretly releases the poisonous spider inside Domenica's drawer before quietly slipping away. At that very moment, Luis Fernando arrives at the ranch to confront Domenica about the missing fences. Before he can finish explaining why he's there, a loud scream echoes through the house. Everyone rushes upstairs to find Domenica in agony after being bitten by the spider. Luis immediately kills the spider, checks her condition, and realizes she needs urgent treatment. Unfortunately, the local clinic is closed, forcing him to drive her to the city hospital as her condition rapidly worsens. Back at the ranch, Chiara casually tells Gennaro what happened. Instead of showing concern, the two are relieved that Luis is handling the situation, convinced the spider bite won't be fatal. Meanwhile, another family conflict unfolds. Maria confronts her mother, accusing her of allowing Gabriel to control every aspect of their lives. Hermina sadly admits that life has always been that way, but Maria refuses to accept that her dreams should be sacrificed simply because she's a girl. Elsewhere, Osvaldo and Adelinda argue over Pedro. Osvaldo demands that she forget about him and declares himself the only man she should love. Their conversation is interrupted when Pilar and Nicolasa arrive looking for someone who can drive them to the city. As Osvaldo agrees to help, Prudencio unexpectedly catches Adelinda hiding in the back of the truck. Furious, he drags her away, leading to a heated confrontation with Osvaldo. The argument quickly turns violent when Osvaldo pulls out a knife and attacks Pedro. Before Pedro can be injured, Nieves bravely steps in and is slashed instead. Enraged, Pedro knocks Osvaldo to the ground and beats him until the others finally pull him away. At the hospital, Luis personally treats Domenica after discovering no doctor is immediately available. Using his own medical experience, he stabilizes her condition and remains by her bedside until she regains consciousness. When Domenica finally opens her eyes, she quietly thanks him for saving her life. However, the moment of peace doesn't last long. As soon as they begin discussing the destroyed fences, another argument erupts between them, ending only when Pilar, Nicolasa, Gennaro, and Chiara arrive at the hospital. Back at the ranch, Nieves recovers from her injury while Pedro thanks her for risking her life to protect him. Although she appreciates his gratitude, Nieves sadly reminds him that his heart already belongs to someone else and asks him to leave so she can rest. At the Espejo de Luna ranch, Prudencio scolds Adelaida for seeing Osvaldo, while Osvaldo returns home bruised from the fight. Gabriel and Gennaro quickly become involved as the conflict between both families continues to grow. Before leaving the hospital, Luis discovers that Domenica accidentally left one of her high heels in his car. At the ranch, Prudencio later fills Luis and Mercedes in on everything that happened during his absence, warning him not to trust Gennaro or his men. The episode ends with another shocking development. On the mayor's orders, the police arrive at the ranch and arrest Pedro, leaving everyone stunned. As Domenica recovers, Nieves visits her and finally reveals everything that